even if you're in a friendship or a relationship and you don't know how to communicate, well, there's not that trust, right?
Mm.
So people also show us where we can meet them.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Be Empowered podcast with your Italian host and psychic healer, Sara here. We're going to discuss the four attachment styles and how they impact you. And I have a special guest today, Renee Chafin, associate therapist. She compassionately guides you through your unique mental health journey, bringing restoration and peace to your life. Renee aims to empower you along your mental health journey and supports you in achieving your goals. Welcome to the show, Renee.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you and talk about the four attachment styles. And before I'm going to have you talk about you, I have to tell the audience the story of. I mean, I do healing all the time, right? I do it on myself, I do it for other people. And then we were at the park, our kids were playing, and you explained the four attachments, which I've heard obviously so well that I was like, oh my God, it's hitting home. Right. And that's why I decided to invite you because I think this is so valuable for people to know. I discuss a lot about energies, but having someone that breaks down the attachment styles is absolutely essential, I think, to get to know you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for sharing that information. And I'm happy to talk about the four attachment styles and kind of break them down where people can understand them a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're gonna get into it. But what inspired you to become who you are today?
Well, I've always had a love of working for people. I worked with kids for a really long time, running my own business, doing that. And then I switched from running a business working with kids to cleaning houses. And one day I started cleaning a house for a senior, somebody who was a little bit elderly. Um, and it turned into, I was cleaning once a week for her, and it quickly turned into more like caretaking. So her family asked if I would come on board as her caregiver. And I really connected with her and we had a good relationship. And so that kind of opened up the door for caretaking and working with a completely different population. And it dawned on me that when my child was old enough to go back to school, it was, a question of what am I going to do? Am I going to find a job in social work? Am I going to go back to school and get my master's and pursue a higher education? And that's the route I decided to take. I already had a bachelor's in social work, so I decided to take it further and get a master's because I just knew I really loved working with people, lots of life experiences, lots of different relationships, kind of embedded that. And it was just a passion of mine from kind of a younger age in my early 20s. So, yeah.
I love that. And how, you have the passion, and then how did that empower you? Because obviously, when we study that, right, when we go through our journey and we pursue that in form of education, how did that impact you? And maybe your ability to parent better, maybe to be, I don't know, a more conscious wife, maybe you've always been, but how that is that impacting your life in a better way in relationship?
I think it's always evolving and growing and changing. I think the more I learn about people and healthy relationships and also like healthy communication, that's what's impacted me the most. I made all the positive changes as a wife and a mom, and even when I was a caregiver, it's just learning how to communicate and have a healthy relationship. And it's always growing and changing and evolving. And again, the more that I learn, the more that I relate to my own life.
I love that. Yeah, it does bring that light, for all of us that are, I call them the light workers. We're here to help people, consciously evolve or raise their vibration or their consciousness, to help them understand better or achieve their goals in your case and help with mental health. Yeah, and it's always evolving. Awesome, awesome. So let's just begin with like talking about the four attachments, but the most important thing is maybe you can give a little bit of an intro of what they are. So we're going to start with the basics because maybe some people are new. Maybe some people they already know, but yeah, what are those?
Okay, so there are four different
Mm-hmm.
attachment styles. So I'll tell each one and then I'll kind of break them down so people can understand what that really means. So there's secure attachment, insecure attachment, anxious, and avoidant. So those are the four main ones. Sometimes there can be a combination of both. You can be anxious avoidant or anxious insecure. So sometimes they kind of bleed into one another, but I'll explain very simply what each one means.
But what are the style? Like, if someone is like, well, why do I need to know that? Right? Like, why is it important? Are they pretty much the styles are like how we connect with other people or to other people? Is that what would describe it as?
So to understand the attachment styles will
Mm-hmm.
help you in many different ways. It'll help you understand building friendships, being in a relationship, who you are as a person. If you're more
Mm,
like an anxious person and you have kind of an anxious attachment, it might help you understand, like, oh, wow, well, that might be why I struggle with keeping friends,
okay.
going out, right? Or maintaining this type of a relationship. So it kind of bleeds into all other aspects of life.
I love that. Okay. Awesome. So there are four main ones, but then we have different, I call them flavors, right? They can be all together, right? Like the anxious, avoidant, and we're going to talk about that. But there are four main ones, you said,
Mhm.
right? The secure,
Mhm.
the insecure, the anxious,
Mhm.
and then you said the avoidant, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay,
One-
so we'll start with secure.
Okay.
So secure is you are secure with who you are as a person, you're confident, you're independent, you're affectionate, you're attentive to other people, um,
Mm,
you know what you want, you know how to help support when it's needed, you know how to resolve conflict. So if conflict occurs, we're not trying to run from it. We know how to
mm.
like communicate in a healthy way, how to work through those pieces without avoiding. So and we also know how to resolve some issues. Um, so that's secure
I
attachment.
love that. Okay.
Yeah. Um, if we have a more insecure attachment,
Hmm.
we're not necessarily going to know how to handle conflict. We're not going to like conflict. When a conflict occurs, we're going to get really nervous. And when we get really nervous, we like shut down. So we don't know how to trust as much.
Okay. There's that trusting piece in there. Okay.
And
Eh, Okay.
so go
Eh,
ahead.
Well, no, I was saying like, okay, so you don't trust. You think like you don't trust the other person. Where does that stem from? Or you don't trust yourself, or both?
You can be a little bit of both. It's really, you might have a hard time trusting your gut.
Mm,
And then when we have a hard time trusting our gut, we're gonna have a harder time communicating with other people, right? Or we're kind of not gonna know like which way this should go. And then when it comes to other people, we're gonna have a harder time trusting that they're telling us the truth or that we can attach to them in a secure way. So we're kind of like distrustful. And when we're insecure, we're also afraid of abandonment. So
mm.
we're scared of being alone, or if we might start to have a close friendship or have someone that we really like, we have a fear that that person's going to disappear.
Okay. The fear of abandonment. Okay, so we have trust and abandonment here, pretty
And
much. Okay.
fear of
And so would you say that they know the insecure attachment how to communicate, or they're like more driven by emotions and they don't know, they shut down or they started having anxiety, like they're more controlled by their emotions? Would you say that because they don't know what's going on?
Absolutely, absolutely. So and that's where you'll notice the difference between insecure and secure, because when we're secure, you might feel those emotions. It's not going to say like you don't have any
Mm,
emotions, right? So they might come up and you might start to feel anxious, but when you're more secure and you're more secure in your attachment, you're going to know how to work through those emotions, communicate those emotions, help people understand where that's coming from for you. And we're not afraid to voice it because we don't fear the conflict. Now conflict might arise, but we don't feel as uncomfortable and kind of we go into that fight or flight response.
Okay. I love that. So, what would you say that it's a typical behavior of the insecure attachment in a relationship? Let's just say that. Is that jealousy? Where you're like, well, you don't love me, or I'm jealous because I'm insecure?
It's more like hungry for approval,
Mm.
sensitive. You feel like you're just always criticized.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've met some people like that, even friends. I'm specifically thinking about friends, you know?
Yeah, you're
Uh,
always kind of seeking like, am I enough? Like, are we okay? Do you love me? Right? Like seeking for that approval because we're just so anxious. We don't ever feel settled and that we like trust that person and everything's going to be okay. So we're constantly asking questions or maybe constantly doing something for that other person, more people pleasing tendencies as well.
okay. Okay. Uh-huh. That's so interesting. So, okay, let's look at the others and then we're going to go deeper into this because I know that there is the anxious and then the avoidant. And I don't know, in my experience, those are the ones that I've had most exposure with. I'm a combo. I was. But yeah, we'll talk about it. So let's do the anxious. Hey, it's Sara here. I'm interrupting the podcast to let you know about the new Be Empowered community app coming soon. This community is designed to be a safe and sacred space for you to heal, unblock, unlock, and transform your life through the power of energy, psychology, and science, and to meet your soul family. Stay tuned and join the waitlist using the link in the description below. And I'll see you soon. Ciao.
Okay. So with anxious, you're going to have difficulty maintaining healthy boundaries. And
Mm,
that might look like we're not sure how to communicate, right? We're too nervous of conflict. We're too worried about what that other person is going to think or say or maybe leave. So we just avoid it altogether. We're just way too anxious. We're more prone to like high conflict relationships, whether that's in friendships or a partnership. Um, and we have more like emotional extremes when we're really anxious.
mm.
Because again, we have a hard time communicating. And if we're not communicating, well, how is anybody going to know or how is it going to get better?
So, what does the anxious um, attachment do in terms of in a relationship? They start having the anxiety, right? And then they're not really good at communicating. So, what's a typical, and I know I'm generalizing, but how do people know if they're anxious attachment? Like, what's a behavior?
Well, you become avoidant, right? So this is where it bleeds in. Sometimes
Bleeds.
yeah, you're anxious avoidant. You're going to shut down. So why we shut down when we're anxious is we were preserving ourselves, right? We're like
Mm.
protecting ourselves. So like instinctually, we kind of just go inward. A
Because
lot of
it's
the
too
times
much.
Yeah, it's too much. We're we're way too worried about it, and a lot of the times it just gets swept under the rug, and then we just try to move on from it. But what happens is it just continues to build because it never gets resolved.
Okay. Yeah. So a lot of the time people, they reach that peak and then they bleed into the avoidant.
Yeah,
Is-
because even if you're in a friendship or a relationship and you don't know how to communicate, well, there's not that trust, right?
mm,
So people also show us where we can meet them. So if you have a friend that has shown you that it's safe, most likely when you're anxious, you'll be able to work through that a little bit better. But if you have a friend showing you that they're not trustworthy, that's only going to build that anxious attachment style. And it's not going to help. We're not going to learn how to become healthier versions, if that makes sense.
yeah. So what you're saying is, and he said to me this before, which is super important, like you need that secure attachment in your life in order to heal, let's say, the anxious avoidant or both of them. If you have like an insecure attachment, you need that secure attachment, whether it's a family member, a friend, or a partner to help you rewire your nervous system?
Exactly, exactly. And learn how to trust and communicate because
Mm.
two huge important pieces in any type of relationship, friendships, partnerships.
I love that. But what happens when someone who is maybe anxious avoidant, like they start pushing people away? What would you say that is? Like you enter a relationship, but then whether it's mistrust or you've been hurt in the past many times, right? So you tend to, yeah, like you go in full force, I'm here, but then like I lean back into the avoidant and I push you away.
Hmm.
Why is happening?
Distrust,
Trust.
fear,
Mm,
fear of abandonment, right? When people start to get too close and say you're in a relationship and like you said, you're going in full force, like, hi, here I am, we're connecting, it's great. And all of a sudden I'm getting scared because I'm getting really close and my emotions are getting really involved. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to retract because it's
mm.
feeling too real and I'm too afraid that you're going to leave.
Wow.
But we
Yeah.
suppress, right? Instead of being able to openly communicate our fears, we hide them and then we're retracting.
Right. And, speaking from my personal experience, I did that many times in my past experiences where I didn't know that piece of communication of expressing that. And so I would pull back, right? Because in my subconscious, I was like, I'm gonna get hurt or I'm falling too hard. And this person is not as, anyway, whatever story I was creating, then I would retract. And I did that in this past relationship that I'm in, but I was met with a secure attachment. So that person, that helped me so much, by the way, in rewiring that brain, because even though I was pushing back, I was able to communicate, hey, all of these things are coming up. My traumas are coming up. My anxiety is coming up. And that secure attachment came in and was like, okay, but I'm not leaving. I'm here. Like, I love you and I'll stay here until you really like are done, which it doesn't seem like you're done. It seems like you're having like an emotional response. He was able to like articulate that for me. That was really healing, by the way. Yeah, I think we need that, right? In order to heal.
We absolutely do. And again, in any type of a relationship, and that's so amazing that he was able to be that for you. Now, when we're also more secure, what
Mm,
happens and what I hear with him is he's patient and he's understanding. He's
patience.
not fearful. He's not fearful, right? He has lots of confidence. He's trying to help
Yeah.
you understand, like, this is okay.
Yeah, I love that. So what would you say that the impatience, because I have clients that are like, and it happened to me too, and clients that tell me the story of, well, that person wanted to jump on too quickly into intimacy and I wasn't ready. So I set my boundaries and they left. What is that? What would you say that is? Is that insecure? Like I want it now, or someone who's like a douchebag?
Well, that could also be somebody with more narcissistic tendencies, right?
Mm,
And they have their own pieces going on.
right.
A lot of the times when we try to hold a boundary, if that person isn't healthy themselves, well, what happens? They're not going to like that boundary.
Yeah,
What's
exactly.
going to happen is they get upset because we're being a healthy version of ourselves and they don't know what to do with that.
And they don't know. Yeah. And we'll talk about, I'll ask you about narcissism and your thoughts. But towards the end right now, I really want to get into the avoidant attachment so we can look at all of the four. So, what's the avoidant?
Okay, so avoidant is more where you're kind of overly rigid.
Mm,
Um, it really does bleed in a lot into anxiety as well, but you're
hmm.
avoidant of conflict, don't know how to communicate, probably more people pleasing tendencies, sweep it under the rug, just calm, just you just want to calm, you don't want anybody escalating. So you're just going to do what you need to do to like reduce any conflict because it doesn't feel good and we just don't know what to do with it instead of being able to sit in it, Sitting in it is extremely uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to avoid it. We're uncomfortable with emotions and conflict, and we want to run from it. So you get into more of a fight or flight, just like with anxiety as well. So those two are they're pretty similar.
Okay, but one is you're having an anxiety kind of like emotional response, anxious response, and the other one is you shut down
Yeah.
and then you avoid it and then you leave or you're just like whatever, like I'm not talking to you, I'll block you
More
without
like
communicating.
more like a physical response, right?
Hmm.
We're just not wanting to go there. And so even emotional, right? We're really shut down. So with
Mm,
anxiety, it might be like flooding. You get really flooded, you get really nervous, you get racing thoughts. It's just you're spiraling.
yeah,
Avoidant is shut down.
right.
Avoidant, you'll see like it's called we call it like stonewalling, and then your wall just goes up.
Wow. And so, what are the steps? What would you say that if you identify as an anxious type, style avoidant, anxious avoidant, what would you say they can do in order to heal? Because for me, as I kind of hint on it, like there was that secure attachment that came into my life. I mean, I did a lot of work on myself to kind of feel safe in my own after narcissistic abuse for me, but then I still had pieces of being the avoidant attachment to be like, well, I'm just going to leave. Like I'm too independent, right? We can go to the extreme of like, I'm so hyper independent. I don't need you. Like, see you, bye,
Mhm.
right? Luckily, I was able to like acknowledge that and communicate. But what if someone doesn't have that piece? What is the first few steps or one step that they can take?
Well, it's really learning about your attachment style,
Mm,
understanding what that is,
yeah,
also understanding what secure attachment is. So then you can start to understand how to rewire and in the ways that you need to rewire. And then also examining your beliefs about
right.
your relationship. What does a friendship look like? What does a partnership look like? Right? So it's really doing a lot of self-reflecting.
Mm.
And when we can self-reflect, we can also learn how to rewire and heal.
But as you were saying, though, there is one attachment style, the avoidant, that is so, I would say, extremely uncomfortable in sitting down and really examining all of these things, right? That's, I would say, for the avoidant is very hard to do in your work. So what would you say for that, for them? Like, how would they start? Is it by sitting in their emotions, understanding?
And yes, it's all of those pieces, and it's learning how to act in the opposite way of
Mm,
that attachment style, right? So
yeah,
if we're really, really, really anxious or really, really, really avoidant, well, it doesn't necessarily feel good, but let's learn how to act opposite. What is the opposite of anxious? What is the opposite of avoidant? It's learning. It's very much a learned behavior, and
mm,
it really takes a lot of time because in the
right,
beginning, it might even seem impossible.
right.
But it's like let's get comfortable being uncomfortable. It's get comfortable being uncomfortable because it will feel uncomfortable. And then as you learn how to rewire and reset that nervous system or that automatic response to go into that, then we start to feel a little bit more comfortable.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love this. And then also you said something like that that was very present in all of the attachments, like learning to communicate. For me, it was like also a missing link of like communicating to the other person, hey, I'm having this right now. I'm having all these thoughts come through and I need to sort through them, or you can sort through them with me because so that the other person, I could bridge that for the other person instead of like, hey, I'm going in my cave, see you, bye. I'm not talking to you for a week. I'm
Mhm.
busy, which is the definition of, I think, workaholic people, when they really put everything in their work and they don't sit with themselves, it's a way of avoiding, right? But I love that. So another thing that a lot of people are questioning or asking themselves, and I want to get your perspective because I have my own perspective on narcissism. But do you think that narcissists are born, like are born evil, they call them, like, or do you think that there was some sort of trauma where they or they learned it from someone and they became the narcissist? Just
Mhm,
curious.
mhm. Um,
Hey, it's Sara here, and I don't want you to miss this. I want to let you know about the upcoming 3-day California retreat, April 4 to April 6, that will completely transform your life. Spots are limited and going fast. Join us by clicking the link in the description below. I'll see you there.
yes, so to speak to that, and I do want to circle back because there was one other thing that came to my mind about learning how to rewire from those
Mm-hmm.
people. I want to circle back because there was one other really important factor to that. But when it comes to narcissism, well, if you think about nature versus nurture, right? So I don't know if you've heard of
Yes.
nature versus nurture, but
Mm.
so everybody has their own genetic makeup,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And some people are born like more with more narcissistic tendencies than another, right? Just like some people are born with more people pleasing tendencies. However, it's also the nurturing and the environment, whether that's going to foster and breed. And yes, we're sometimes trauma, right, causes that to get worse and increase, or learning how to manage and tame it and how to rewire from those more narcissistic thoughts. So it's very much it's both.
I love that. So, would you say though that they can eventually revert it back and learn to foster that to, a more healthy relationship with themselves and others? But it requires the ability to look inside, right?
I was just going to say that it takes a lot of self-reflection, right? And it takes a lot of like work on self
Hmm.
and recognizing that piece. There's a lot of narcissists out there that they will just deny that, all the way through that they have those because they don't see it. Other
They
people
don't
can
see it.
tell them, right? But they don't see it. I'm fine. Like, what do you mean? Like, you have something wrong with you, right? They're not self-reflecting. They're not going internal.
So,
So
what would you say that is? Avoidant or delusional completely? From, a more psychological point of view.
sometimes they can be both,
Okay.
right? Because here again, it's that uncomfortable piece.
Mm,
How true narcissist um, really just think it's everybody else's problem.
right.
They're not the
That's
ones with the problem. Everybody else has the problem, right? So, but again, like what happened to them in their childhood? What did their environment look like? Who were they surrounded with? Were there other people in their family that were narcissists? And then they just learned how to foster that and have it grow because it can make all the difference. Just like if you have borderline personality disorder, well, sometimes with that nature versus nurture, you have parents with borderline personality disorder. It's learned, right? And it,
yeah.
mhm,
Okay. Wow. Yeah, it's so fascinating. And I know that there is the full-blown narcissist, and then we have people, and especially like I've met a lot of people that even in their family members, maybe there's not the full-blown narcissist, but maybe there is someone in their life with narcissistic traits, which is a very fine line, right? You're kind
mhm,
of like, well, I want to love you. I know that there's good, but yet you have these tendencies that are
mhm.
hurtful.
Sure. And also, like a lot of us can have those tendencies, right? Like a little healthy sprinkle of narcissism sometimes, but
Yeah.
it's how we respond to it. Like if somebody points it out to us and it was hurtful, are we able to self-reflect, own that piece, and work towards changing it?
Hmm. Yeah, it's a lot of self-reflection, inner work, shadow work, however we want to call that is can we admit, take accountability,
Hmm.
move forward?
Yeah, I talk with a lot of my clients about taking ownership, right? But being able to take ownership means we have to become vulnerable. And a lot
Mm,
of people, like, they don't like being in that vulnerable space. Like, it doesn't feel good. That feels a little bit scary. Letting down those walls, becoming more vulnerable. So just like when you're in a, if you have an insecure attachment and here your partner is secure, you had to become more vulnerable in order to help him understand how to meet you and also learn how to rewire.
wow. Yeah. Yeah, that's so amazing to hear. That's so fascinating, actually. Yeah, we have to learn to rewire. And I think that leads me to another thing because in my own personal journey with the secure attachment, I had to learn to rewire. But a lot of the time, people are like, "Well, do you think that you are rewiring your brain? Like, how do I understand whether it's my trauma response and me rewiring the brain, or I'm meeting the narcissist and my intuition is speaking up?" And I'd love to hear your thoughts, right? Because a lot of people, maybe they're not in touch with fully with their intuition, or, narcissist and covert narcissist. I mean, they can be very sneaky, I would say. I mean, the full blown narcissist, sometimes it's like it's really obvious to see. And the covert ones, like maybe you see them after that wedding day. A lot of the time, that's what I hear. It's like the next day they change. So a lot of the time, I get this question: how can you understand whether it's your intuition warning you, or you're working through your trauma and you're trying to rewire your brain with that person? What are your thoughts?
Okay, so if I understand what you're saying, if it's intuition, it's about following your gut, right? But
Hmm.
narcissists are really good at manipulating and they're really good at gaslighting and they're really good at making you feel like you're crazy, right?
Right.
But being able to follow your gut is intuition. A trauma response can be like if you were having like a physical,
Hmm.
emotional response to what that person is doing.
That's a trauma response.
Mhm.
Wow, I love how you said it. It's a physical symptoms to what the other person is doing.
Mhm.
So if the other person, oh, okay, go
Or
ahead.
emotional. Like maybe you're so traumatized that you just break down crying. But that's like a trauma response, right? So
Okay.
emotional. Now physical response, your body might start to shake. You're having a full-blown bodily response to that trauma.
Okay. So in order for people to understand it better, and how I understood what you said is, okay, if they're the trauma response can occur after they do something or say something,
Mhm.
right? So how we understand it there, this secure attachment is, what if they're like being secure and positive and emotionally available, and they're a positive, nurturing presence in our life, but then we still have that, then it's our body like trying to clear it and reprogram. Because that's what happened to me, right? I was able to verbalize that, but I already knew that it was the secure attachment, that it wasn't narcissistic.
Mhm.
And so in order to explain that is, he would, the other person, if the other person is a positive presence in your life, they're like not manipulative, they're not trying to take from you, they're not gaslighting you, and then you're still having like some symptoms, that is your, I would say, like you trying to work through it and reprogram and rewiring. Is that how you would describe it?
Absolutely. And we like to call those triggers,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So
Triggered.
you're having flashbacks
Mm-hmm.
of probably past relationships and things that used to happen to you. And it wasn't coming from him, but even just talking about it brings up that trigger and then that trauma response. And then we want to get into like a fight or flight. And it has nothing to do with that person, but it has everything to do with the past and the people that brought that on, if that makes sense.
Okay, I love that. So pretty much, guys, work on yourself. At least know yourself really well, so that when that comes, you know that Maybe it's your intuition and you have to follow your gut, or you're really rewiring your brain because you know yourself. You know that that's has nothing to do with that person that you are dating, maybe, or that friend. Has to do with your past.
Absolutely. And in order to rewire, the part of it I wanted to circle back on is encouraging people to seek out healthy relationships. People who are not trying to manipulate, not trying to gaslight, not trying to take in any way, shape, or form. Know what that trauma trigger looks like. Be patient, right? Not making us feel shame or embarrassment or in any way, shape, or form, anything like that. Is very understanding and can be there to help us rewire. So it's all about seeking healthy relationships, because if we have a relationship that's anxious and then you have somebody who's insecure, well, now you have an anxious, insecure relationship. And how is that going to work, right? Because we have avoidant and then we have people sweeping things under the rug. So in order
Mm.
to rewire and change that, you have to have that secure, healthy relationship.
And I love this, but what do you think about the fact that people keep at- attracting maybe unhealthy relationship? Is it because it's familiar and it's comfortable for their nervous system, like that's all of they've known, and also, yes, we want to find healthy relationships, but there are some people, and I remember I was too. You're addicted to the chaos, so a lot of the time, healthy relationship, like a healthy, intimate, stable relationship for someone who was born or raised in chaos feels absolutely boring, you know? So, what would you say? Like, how can a person who has lived in chaos and finds healthy relationship boring, how can they start attracting or finding healthier relationship? Like, how can they reprogram their brain? Like, is there something that you would suggest?
It's really, that's where we probably would come in and do a lot of work with like childhood
Hmm.
experiences, right? Because it's really how what the brain is wired to, and helping them understand, okay, well, you think chaos is normal, but helping them understand what normal really looks like. And if you're bored, is it really, are you really bored? Right? Or are we just so used to this different way that we don't know what to do with this and it feels uncomfortable?
Right. And that's, I think, one of the missing link because it feels uncomfortable, someone who doesn't yell at you. I mean, coming from my own personal experience, that I finally found the secure attachment. Like at first I was like, well, there's no repercussion, there is no punishment, there's no yelling. Like that's really interesting. That's different. That's not familiar for my nervous system. And I think a lot of people can resonate with this, that it does take time to rewire, and a lot of maybe childhood therapy or healing, to heal that inner child.
Yes, and learning that the way the brain wired, it didn't wire in a healthy way. So it absolutely takes time, work, understanding, self reflection in order to start seeing it differently. So maybe if you're in a relationship that doesn't have any of that, that's not boring. That's just healthy. And
Mm.
that's what it should really look like, right? But when we're constantly like, if we met somebody like that and we didn't have the insight, we didn't have the awareness, yeah, that might seem boring and we don't like that, right? But it's really helping that person gain that insight and understanding as to what normal is.
Yes. Normal, healthy, not boring. Well, I mean, it can be boring, but it's not boring. It's actually healthy. Yeah,
It's
rewiring, all of that.
it's not abusive.
It's not abusive. Absolutely. And it takes some time to like look back, and realize all the things because I think if we don't have that personal development piece, we don't even acknowledge it. We don't realize where it came from. We don't realize we're doing it.
And a lot of the times we have like a lot of like self-defeating thoughts or
Mhm.
self-esteem, right? We're just used to being treated one way, but that's abuse, emotional, verbal, physical, So when we meet somebody that's not doing that, well, that seems weird, right? Because that's what we're used to. But that doesn't mean that that's normal and healthy. That's very unhealthy. So when you meet somebody that's the complete opposite of that, well, most likely they're a healthy person and they just don't know what that looks like.
Yeah.
And it's learning how to help them build their self-esteem. It's extremely important. You got to learn how to build your self-esteem and then start learning how to rewire into more of like a secure attachment style, because when you have low self-esteem, you're still in like insecure, avoidant attachment styles because you don't have that empowerment within self to make those changes even.
Wow. Yeah. And so do you think that the the jealousy, especially among women, right? I mean, I've had a lot of that. A lot of my clients have had that where there is betrayal, maybe there is jealousy for another woman. And a lot of women compare themselves to other women. Like that's just, I think, the majority of women. That's something that when I was young, it was really hard for me to understand because I just wanted to be loved and accepted. And it wasn't the case, but it kind of like the pattern continue, or we call it the witch wound, in spirituality, being betrayed by another woman. And would you say that they're insecure? And so they can't foster the thought that you may have, you may be you. And, they might be themselves, but they're very insecure about themselves. So they shut down or they shut you off, the circle or whatever it is.
Yeah, a lot of the times when clients are talking about that or expressing any forms of jealousy or difficulty being around other people, then I really start to kind of dive in into more of their self-esteem.
Yeah,
Because it makes sense where somebody would have more of a low self-esteem for jealousy to kind of come in. Because if you're like a secure person, you'd be able to be like, pointing out all the positives. And even if somebody has things better than you, or now let's face it, there's always going to be somebody prettier or doing better things, right? But
right.
you can detach from that and be happy for that person without feeling insecure about yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, which is definitely something to talk about in another episode, the detachment piece, because a lot of people, I think especially anxious people, don't really know how to detach. Like they become codependent. Is that what you see? Like the anxious attachment becomes so codependent. A lot of people have a hard time loving without obsessing,
Mhm.
without ruminating about it. They create their own reality. So would you say that someone that ruminates and obsessively thinks about someone else, is that more anxious attachment or insecure? What would you say that is?
Well, when we're ruminating, if you're talking about like ruminating thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
that's really fed by like anxiety and fear. It's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
OCD, obsessive compulsive behavior, um, is
Yeah.
fed by fear and anxiety. And that's where like the ruminating and like those racing thoughts and we can't stop it, that's what's feeding it. So absolutely more like anxiety based.
Right. And any tools that they can implement to help with that, what would you say? If someone would ask you that, maybe the first step.
Being able to recognize what's happening,
Mm-hmm.
that's the
That's
first step.
it
You have to
is.
learn how to recognize that that's happening and then learn the coping skills and tools and strategies to slow down those racing thoughts. And we talk a lot about like thought diffusion. There's a lot of techniques in order
Yeah.
to be able to detach and rewire and stop those racing thoughts. But if we're not told, it's very much learned. So if it's not taught to you and it's not told to you, well, how do you even know how to stop that? But that is the first step, is just learning that it's even happening, recognizing that it's happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because then we enter the power of the mind.
Right, we're totally out of control. So it's
Yes.
learning how to gain back that control.
Oh, yeah. When you're out of control with your emotions, it's like madness, crazy. You feel like crazy for sure.
Like a tornado in your brain, right? So how do
Yeah.
we tame that tornado?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I grew up with that, I had a role model totally out of control in their with their emotions. And I literally started studying the power of the mind. Now you might have coping mechanism that have worked really well for you. I think meditation for me and sitting was a skill set I adopted since 19 years old. But I also know that that's very hard for people to just sit and silence the mind. Um, yeah, and you mentioned something. What is the first thing? You just said it. What is a coping mechanism? Just one. What is it? Thought diffusion.
Oh, yeah, thought
What
diffusion.
is that in like a sentence?
It's a coping skill for being able to calm the thoughts. Um, and that's basically in and of itself what it is learning how to basically zoom out from those thoughts and get them to stop racing. So thought diffusion, they're techniques that we teach.
I love that. So thank you so much. Anything else you'd like to say for the audience or finish up with a line? What would you say?
Yeah, I would just encourage everybody who is curious about attachment styles. You can read up on it more. There's always so much to learn about it, but it's really recognizing what attachment style you are. And if you're wanting to change that, seeking out those more healthy relationships where you're not being manipulated or gaslighted or shamed in any way, shape, or form. And then we can start to learn how to rewire.
Mm, absolutely. And I will add your contact info down below so that they can find you. And if they would like more of this approach, they will reach out. So in the description below, but where they can find you right away. Do you have a website and or should we add that in the link below?
We can do both. You can add it in the link below. I can provide that to you, or you can go to www.dayrosetherapygroup.com and you can find me on there. We do provide teletherapy inside of California. If you're
Hmm.
outside of California, it gets a little trickier. Some states allow therapists to come in and provide therapy in different states, but a lot of states do not. So that's kind of where that fine line comes into play.
Mm, I didn't know that. Thank you for the info. All right. Well, I'll add your info down below. And thank you so much, Renee, for your time and knowledge. And I'll see you all in the next episode.
All right, thanks for having me.